hadn't been home in 7 years. The town looked exactly the same. Main Street with its rows of brick storefronts that hadn't been updated since the 90s. The old water tower looming over everything like a rusted sentinel. The same 3 traffic lights that were always inexplicably timed wrong. Even the smell was familiar. That mix of dry grass and someone's chimney smoke that somehow felt like childhood. But something was wrong. I couldn't place it at first, standing on the curb outside the bus station with my duffel bag, trying to remember why I'd left in the first place. Then I noticed people watching me. Not staring exactly. They'd glance over, see me, and then deliberately turn away. The kind of studied avoidance you learn to recognize when you've been gone long enough. Mrs. Holloway was closing her flower shop across the street, and when she saw me, she hurried inside without her usual wave. 2 teenagers on the corner shifted nervously and crossed to the other side. Even the afternoon felt wrong. There was a brittleness to it, like the whole town was holding its breath. I told myself I was being paranoid. 7 years away and I was reading too much into nothing. I shouldered my duffel and started walking toward my parents' house, letting muscle memory guide me through the familiar streets. My mother opened the door before I could knock. She looked smaller than I remembered. Not physically, but diminished somehow. Like life had quietly worn her down. Then she pulled me into a hug so tight it hurt, and I felt her trembling. "You came back," she said into my shoulder, not quite a question. "Only for a week," I replied. Like I said. My father appeared behind her, and they exchanged a look I couldn't quite read. It was the kind of look married people share when they've already discussed something and are unsure how to proceed. It made my stomach twist. Dinner was quiet, just the 3 of us. My younger sister Lily was at college out of state. We made small talk about my job in the city, my apartment, whether I'd met anyone special. My parents answered when spoken to, but never quite expanded on anything. They seemed nervous, distracted. My mother kept checking the kitchen clock. "So why does everyone act like they've seen a ghost?" I finally asked, setting down my fork. "Mrs. Holloway practically ran away from me." My parents exchanged another look. "People just surprise easily," my father said carefully. "When someone leaves town and suddenly comes back." "I've been gone 7 years," I said. "It's not that surprising." "No," my mother said quietly. "But you arrived just before sunset and you were wearing—" She stopped herself, but her eyes flicked to my red sweater. I'd changed into it before the bus ride because it was one of my favorites, and the weather had cooled down that afternoon. It was just a sweater. A perfectly normal, boring maroon-red hoodie I'd thrown on without thinking. "Wearing what?" I pressed. "This sweater?" "It's fine now," my father said, a little too quickly. "You're inside. It's fine now." The way he said it. Like now was the operative word. Like it mattered where I was and what time it was. "Okay," I said slowly. "That's not weird at all." My mother reached across the table and squeezed my hand. Her grip was tight, almost desperate. "Honey, tomorrow, when you go out, could you just maybe wear something different? Something in blue or green or really anything but red," I finished. I set down my fork. "What is this? Is this some kind of joke?" "It's not a joke," my father said. There was something in his voice, not anger, but something harder, something scared. "When you're outside after sunset, don't wear red. That's all we're asking." "That's a strange thing to ask," I said. "That's an insane thing to ask." "Just do it," my mother said. Her voice had gone thin. "Please, just for this week, just while you're home." I wanted to press them further, but something in their faces stopped me. They looked afraid, genuinely afraid, Not of me exactly, but of something they couldn't quite explain. I'd never seen my parents look like that before, and it frightened me in a way I couldn't articulate. "Fine," I said eventually. "Fine. I won't wear red." They both visibly relaxed, which somehow made it worse. After dinner, I went upstairs to my old room, still exactly as I'd left it. Posters of bands I hadn't listened to in years still taped to the walls. I changed into a blue t-shirt and tried to convince myself I was being ridiculous, getting worked up over nothing. People had quirks. Every town had weird little superstitions and rules. Probably this was just some local thing that had started as a joke and somehow became ingrained. Small towns did that. But I couldn't shake the fear in my mother's voice, and the way my father had said, "after sunset," like it was a specific deadline that mattered. Around 9 o'clock, I decided to walk downtown for a while, to clear my head and stretch my legs. The town was quiet at night, quieter than I remembered. The streets were nearly empty, just a few people walking briskly on the sidewalks, all of them carefully dressed in dark colors: black, navy, forest green, brown. I didn't see a single person wearing red. I walked down Main Street and made it as far as the old courthouse before I noticed something that made me stop dead. There was a sign on the edge of town, partially hidden behind some overgrown shrubs near the courthouse steps. It was old, really old. The paint faded to barely visible pastels, but I could still make out the letters. I pushed through the brush to read it better, and what I saw there sent ice through my veins. "Red at night, a marker for the hunt." The words were incomplete, cut off at the edges as if the sign had once been larger. There was more writing below, but it was too faded to read. I stood there for a long time, staring at those words, trying to make sense of them. Red at night, a marker, the hunt. You don't want to be reading that. I spun around. Behind me stood an old woman I didn't recognize, thin, white-haired, with eyes that looked both ancient and sharp. She was wearing a dark green coat. "What does it say?" I asked. "The rest of it, I mean. What's the whole sign?" She studied me for a long moment, and I saw something flicker in her expression. Recognition, maybe. Or pity. "Welcome home," she said finally. And then she turned and walked away, disappearing into the shadows between the streetlights. I stood there for a long time after she left, looking at that faded sign. A marker for the hunt. The phrase wouldn't leave my head. I reached out and tried to wipe away more of the paint, but it was too old, too worn. The rest of the message was lost to time. I didn't tell my parents about the sign. I'm not sure why. Maybe I already knew on some level that there was something they weren't telling me, and asking them about it directly would only make them more afraid. Maybe some part of me didn't want to know the answer. That night, I lay in bed listening to the sounds of my childhood home. The old pipes creaking, wind in the eaves, the distant sound of a car passing on the highway beyond town. And I kept thinking about those words, that worn-out warning painted on a sign so old that almost no one read it anymore. Red at night, a marker for the hunt. I looked out my bedroom window at the empty streets below, all of them dark and quiet and utterly still. And I wondered what I'd come home to. I woke up, determined to get answers. The morning light filtered through my old bedroom window, and the paranoia of the previous night seemed slightly ridiculous in the daylight. The sign was probably just some old joke, something teenagers had painted decades ago. The rule about red was probably just a town superstition, the kind of harmless weirdness every place accumulated over time. My parents were probably overreacting about nothing. I told myself this repeatedly while getting dressed, choosing a blue shirt to wear. Just in case. Just to keep the peace. Downstairs, my mother was making breakfast. She seemed relieved when she saw what I was wearing, and actually smiled for the first time since I'd arrived. My father had already left for his job at the insurance office, apparently unable to face the morning without escape. Lily had texted to say she couldn't make it home this week. Too much schoolwork. I wondered if she'd been told to stay away. "I'm going to walk around town today," I said, buttering toast. "Visit some old friends, see what's changed." My mother's smile faded slightly. "That's nice. Just remember, no red after sunset," I finished. "I remember." She flinched at the sharpness in my tone, and I felt guilty. She was just worried, even if I didn't understand why. "I mean, I've got it," I added more gently. "I'll be back before dark anyway." The morning passed in a strange blur of familiar places. I walked down Main Street, popped into the old coffee shop where Jake Morrison worked. He recognized me, but the conversation felt strained. When I casually brought up the red after sunset thing, he got quiet. "Oh, that," he said, focusing intently on the espresso machine. "Yeah, it's just something people do around here." "But why?" I pressed. "Is there actually a reason, or is it just tradition?" he said quickly. Too quickly. "You know how small towns are. Weird stuff sticks around forever." He didn't meet my eyes, and he found a reason to disappear into the back before I could ask anything else. I tried again with Sandra Martinez, who used to be my lab partner in high school. We grabbed lunch at the diner, and the conversation started pleasantly enough, catching up about our lives, mutual friends, what everyone was doing. But when I asked about the rule, she literally put down her fork and stared at me. "Why are you asking about that?" she said quietly. "Because everyone acts terrified whenever it comes up," I said. "So either there's a good explanation or you're all insane, and I'm trying to figure out which." Sandra looked around the diner like she was checking to see if anyone was listening. "Look, it's not a big deal, okay? It's a rule. Wear dark colors after sunset. Simple, easy to follow. No one breaks it, no one has problems." "But what if someone does break it?" I asked. "What happens?" She stood up abruptly. "I don't feel well. I'm going to head home." She left before I could say anything else, leaving her half-eaten sandwich on the table. By afternoon, I was frustrated and increasingly unnerved. Every single person I talked to gave the same non-answer in different ways. It was just tradition. It was just how things were. No one could explain why or when it started. Some people would get defensive. Others would change the subject. A few looked genuinely frightened when I pressed them, like I was asking them to describe something they deliberately tried to forget. I decided to try the library. If I couldn't get answers from people, maybe I could find them in records. The Millbrook Public Library was housed in an old Victorian building that had been converted in the 80s. It was cool and quiet inside, and the afternoon light came through tall windows in dusty golden shafts. I found the microfiche machine and started scrolling through old newspapers, going back decades. Nothing. I searched for red, sunset, rule, incident. Nothing relevant came up. There were notices about town meetings, ads for businesses long since closed, obituaries and birth announcements, but nothing that explained anything about the rule. I was about to give up when I noticed Mrs. Patricia Hartford, the head librarian, watching me from her desk. She'd been there since before I was born, a thin woman with sharp features and sharper eyes. She approached me slowly, like someone approaching a nervous animal. "Can I help you find something?" she asked. Her voice was carefully neutral. "I'm just looking up some town history," I said. "From the 60s or 70s, maybe?" I watched her face change. It was subtle, just a slight tightening around her eyes, but it was there. fear. "The microfiche from that period is damaged," she said. "Illegible, really. We've been meaning to restore them, but never found the funding." It was a lie. I could see it in the way she wouldn't hold my gaze. "What about your archives?" I asked. "Do you have Old Town records or—" "The archives are closed for restoration," she said. "Have been for months. I'm sorry." She turned and walked back to her desk before I could say anything else. I sat there for a moment, staring at the microfiche, feeling something cold settle in my chest. Two different stories about preservation and damage. Convenient timing. I was gathering my things to leave when I noticed Mrs. Hartford on the phone in her office, visible through the glass. She was looking directly at me while she talked, her face grave. She hung up quickly when she saw me looking. Outside the library, the afternoon was starting to shift toward evening. The sun was lower than I'd realized, and the shadows between buildings were getting longer. I checked my phone. 5:47 p.m. I had maybe 2 hours before sunset, and I was supposed to be home before dark. I decided to take one more shot at getting answers. There was one person in town who might actually tell me the truth. Mrs. Eleanor Voss, who taught history at the high school and had always had a reputation for being straightforward, almost to the point of rudeness. She was still there, I knew, because I'd seen the school's fall schedule posted somewhere. I walked across town toward the high school building, my unease growing as the light continued to fade. The streets were already starting to fill with people heading home, all of them in dark clothes, all of them moving with purpose. Mrs. Voss was in her classroom grading papers. She looked up when I knocked on the open door, and her expression went carefully blank. "Hello," she said. "I heard you were back in town." "News travels fast," I said. "Can I ask you something?" "You're going to whether I say yes or no," she replied, setting down her red pen. "So go ahead." I liked her immediately. The rule about red after sunset. What's it actually about? She was quiet for a long moment. I thought she might be the one person who would actually give me a straight answer. But then she got up and walked to the window, peering out at the darkening sky. "How much time are you spending in this town?" she asked. "Just a week. Then I go back to the city." "Good," she said. "Then my advice is, follow the rule, don't ask questions, and leave when you said you would." "That's not an answer," I said. "That's just evasion." She turned to face me, and there was something haunted in her expression. "It's the only answer I can give you. Some things are better left alone. Some knowledge is a burden nobody should carry." "Is anyone in danger?" I asked. "If I wear red after sunset, will something actually happen to me?" Mrs. Voss looked at me for a long time. "I don't know," she said finally. "No one's been stupid enough to test it in a very long time. The last person who did—" She trailed off, shaking her head. "That was before you were born. We don't talk about it." "Why not?" "Because," she said quietly, "we'd rather pretend it never happened." She walked to her desk and started gathering her things, signaling that the conversation was over. As I left, she called after me. "Go home. Lock the doors. Don't go outside after dark." The walk home felt longer than it should have. The sun was definitely setting now, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple that would have been beautiful if they hadn't felt ominous. People hurried past me on the sidewalks, their movements quick and deliberate. No one was lingering. No one was taking their time. When I got home, my mother was waiting on the porch, looking anxious. "Where have you been?" she asked. "It's almost dark." "Just asking people about the rule," I said. "No one will explain it. What happened? What's the last person who broke the rule?" My mother's face went very pale. "Don't," she said. "Don't ask about that." "Why not?" "Because it's a wound that won't heal if you keep poking at it," she said. "Please, please just let it go." Inside, my father was already home, and dinner was waiting. We ate in silence. The television played softly in the background, some news program no one was actually watching. I kept thinking about what Mrs. Voss had said. No one in a very long time, which meant someone had. That night, as the sun fully set and darkness claimed the town, I lay in bed and wondered who it had been. I wondered what had happened to them. I wondered why an entire town had decided it was better to pretend something had never occurred than to face whatever truth might be lurking beneath. And I wondered what would happen if I decided to find out. I made the decision on the third day. I'd spent the morning trying to act normal, helping my mother in the garden, watching television with my father. But beneath it all, I was seething. Everyone in this town knew something, and they'd all decided I wasn't worth telling. The patronizing way they deflected, the fear in their eyes, the careful omissions, it all pointed to the same conclusion. They were hiding something, and they thought I was stupid enough not to notice. By afternoon, I'd made up my mind. My bright red hoodie was still in my duffel bag, the one I'd been wearing when I arrived. I laid it out on my bed and stared at it, knowing what I was about to do was stupid, reckless, and probably dangerous. I also knew it was the only way I was going to get any real answers. I waited until around 7 p.m. when the sun had just touched the horizon. My parents were in the living room watching the news. I called down that I was going out for a walk to clear my head, that I'd be back soon. My mother tensed, but she didn't say anything. Maybe she thought I was following the rules. Maybe she didn't want to know. I put on the red hoodie over a dark shirt and stepped out into the dying light. The moment I closed the door behind me, the temperature seemed to drop. The evening air had a bite to it that hadn't been there in the afternoons. A crisp warning. I pulled the hood up and started walking toward downtown, my heart hammering harder than the situation seemed to warrant. The streets were already emptying. A few people were hurrying home, their silhouettes moving quickly against the fading orange sky. I didn't see anyone else in red. Everyone was in blacks, grays, browns, dark blues, colors that dissolved into the coming darkness. I walked past the old courthouse, past the movie theater that had been closed for 5 years, past the bank with its dark windows. The sun was lower now, hanging just above the tree line. My shadow stretched long behind me on the sidewalk. That's when I first noticed I was being watched. It wasn't something I could see directly. It was that prickling sensation on the back of your neck, the instinctive knowledge that something is tracking you. I turned around several times, but the streets behind me were empty. No one there. Just empty sidewalk and lengthening shadows. I kept walking anyway. Stupidly, stubbornly, I kept walking. The sun dipped lower. The sky shifted from orange to a deeper amber, and the shadows between buildings deepened into something almost black. I was on Main Street now, and I realized with a start that there was literally no one else outside. The entire downtown had emptied. Shops had their lights on inside, but all their doors were locked, their windows dark. It was like the whole town had retreated indoors and pulled the shutters closed. That's when the first streetlight went out. It wasn't gradual. One moment it was on, casting a small pool of sickly yellow light on the sidewalk below. The next moment, it simply wasn't. Dead. The bulb hadn't burned out. I could still see the fixture intact in the dimming light. It had just stopped. I stopped walking. My breath was coming faster now, my rational mind struggling to find an explanation. Electrical fault? A power surge? Even as I thought it, the next streetlight went out, 50 feet ahead of me. Then the one after that. The lights were dying in sequence. In front of me, I turned around. The lights behind me were still on, flickering slightly but still burning. This thing, whatever it was ahead of me, which meant I could turn around, go home, forget this entire stupid idea. I didn't. I took another step forward. The scratching sound started then. It was faint at first, like fingernails dragging across wood, but it was coming from multiple directions.
above me, from the walls of the buildings, from the alley to my left. Not quite.
Regular, but not random either. There was a rhythm to it, almost like deliberate communication. Scratch, scratch. Pause. Scratch, scratch, scratch. My hands were shaking. The red hoodie suddenly felt like the worst decision I'd ever made. I could take it off, I thought. I could strip it off right now and throw it in the trash, and maybe nothing would... A shadow moved across the street in front of me. I didn't see it directly. It was more like the absence of light shifted, darkness moving with too much intention to be anything natural. It happened in my peripheral vision, and when I tried to look at it head-on, there was nothing there. Just the normal darkness of dusk. But it had been there. I was sure of it. The scratching intensified. Now it was coming from the storefront next to me, the old record shop that had been abandoned for years. I looked through the dark window and saw movement inside. Multiple shadows, moving wrong. Moving in ways that suggested joints that bent too many directions, or limbs that didn't correspond to any body structure I could recognize. I started walking faster. The sun was almost gone now. The sky had turned a deep purple blue, that color that comes right before true darkness. And the streetlights continued to die, one by one, always ahead of me, always marking a path deeper into the dark. That's when I heard the sound. It wasn't the scratching anymore. This was something else. A sound like breathing, but wet and wrong. Like something with too many lungs trying to suck air through a mouth that was never meant for breathing. It came from everywhere and nowhere, echoing off the brick buildings. I ran. I didn't think about it. There was no deliberation, no logical consideration. Instinct just seized control and I was running, my feet pounding against the pavement, the red hoodie flapping behind me like a target. The scratching intensified into something almost like screaming, high-pitched and discordant. Behind me, I heard movement, fast movement, the sound of something large knocking over a trash can, the crash of breaking glass. I didn't look back. I couldn't look back. I tore around a corner and saw my street. The houses looked normal, warm lights glowing in their windows, the illusion of safety and civilization just 50 yards away. I ran harder. The breathing sound followed me, getting closer. That wet, wrong sound of something trying to respire in an atmosphere it wasn't meant for. I was making sounds I didn't recognize, gasping prayers and curses, my mind fragmenting into pure survival instinct. I hit my front porch at a dead sprint and crashed through the door. My parents were on me instantly. My mother started screaming. Not words, just raw sounds of panic and terror. My father grabbed me and pulled me deeper inside, slamming the door and deadbolting it. Through the frosted glass panes, I saw something move past on the porch. Just a shape, a darkness that was somehow darker than the night around it.
"Jesus Christ!" my father shouted. "Jesus Christ, what were you thinking?"
I couldn't answer. I was collapsed on the kitchen tile, still wearing the red hoodie, my entire body shaking so badly I thought I might vomit. My mother was hovering over me, checking me for injuries, her hands shaking as badly as mine. "Are you hurt?" she kept asking. "Are you hurt? Are you hurt?" I shook my head, not trusting my voice. My father moved to the window and looked out through the curtains. His face had gone white, drained of all color. "It's still out there," he said quietly. The scratching resumed on the porch. Not threatening exactly, but deliberate, patient. Like something was exploring the boundaries of the house, testing the walls, trying to find a way in. My mother pulled me up and practically carried me upstairs, my father following behind. They got me to my room and shut the door, and my mother started pulling off the red hoodie like it was contaminated. Never, she was saying. Never again. Do you understand me? Never again. What is it? I managed to ask. What the hell is that thing? My parents exchanged a look, and I saw something break in their expressions. The dam that had held back their fear and their knowledge finally cracked. We'll tell you, my father said. His voice sounded like it was coming from very far away. We'll tell you everything, but first, you need to understand that you're still alive. That's not guaranteed. The fact that you made it home means... He paused, searching for words. It means you're not the one it wanted. Down on the porch, the scratching continued. Slow, patient, hungry. And somewhere in that sound, I thought I heard something almost like laughter. We sat in my parents' bedroom with the door locked and all the lights on. My mother had made tea that no one was drinking. My father stood at the window, occasionally peeking through the curtains at the dark street below. The scratching had stopped about 20 minutes ago, but none of us believed it was really gone. It was out there somewhere, waiting, patient. Where do we even start? My mother asked, more to herself than to me. The beginning, I said. My voice sounded strange to my own ears, calmer than I felt, like someone else was speaking through my mouth. Shock, probably. Tell me about the last person who broke the rule. My parents exchanged that look again, the one that said they'd already discussed this, already agreed to tell me, already decided how much was too much. His name was Daniel Pritchard, my father said finally. He sat down on the edge of the bed, suddenly looking very old. He was 16. This was in 1987, so before you were born, before your mother and I were even married. I waited. There was a girl, my mother continued. Jessica. She lived 2 streets over. Daniel was obsessed with her. Everyone knew it. And Jessica was... She was sweet, but she wasn't interested in Daniel. She was interested in Marcus Chen. He's Mrs. Holloway's nephew, actually. Marcus is older, already in college, and Jessica thought he was sophisticated. One night, my father said, Daniel decided to prove something. He decided to prove that the rule didn't matter, that it was all nonsense. So he put on his mother's red dress and walked downtown after sunset, deliberately trying to be seen. I felt my stomach clench. What happened? Nothing, my father said. For about 10 minutes, nothing happened. He walked down Main Street, waving at people through shop windows, laughing. He thought it was funny. He thought we were all idiots for believing in a rule about nothing. My mother's hands were clenched so tightly, her knuckles had turned white. Then it came, she said quietly. We don't know how to describe it exactly. People only saw it for a few seconds before it took him. But everyone who was watching saw something. What? I asked. What did they see? Shadows, my father said. But not normal shadows. Shadows that moved independently of anything casting them. Shadows that reached out like tentacles and wrapped around him. And then he stopped, unable to find the words. Gone, my mother finished. He was there, and then he wasn't. Some people said he'd been pulled into an alley. Others swore they saw him dragged straight up into the air. One person claimed they saw him folded in half, like he was made of paper. They found him 3 days later, my father continued. In Riverside Cemetery. He was in pieces. Not like he'd been torn apart by an animal. More like he'd been taken apart by something very deliberate. The pieces were arranged in a specific pattern around a gravestone. The Pritchard family plot, coincidentally. The pattern looked almost like writing, but no one could figure out what language. I felt bile rise in my throat. And nobody did anything? Nobody tried to stop it? Stop what? My father asked bitterly. Stop something that moves faster than thought? Stop something that doesn't follow any rules we understand? The police tried to investigate, but what were they going to investigate? They had no evidence of foul play, just a dead kid arranged strangely. The town decided it was a message. A message about what? I demanded. About keeping the rule, my mother said. About what happens when you don't. My father stood up and walked to the window again, looking out at the darkness. After Daniel died, the town had a meeting. It was unofficial, but everyone who mattered showed up. Businessmen, teachers, the police chief, the mayor. They all agreed on one thing. The rule had to be reinforced. Not because they understood what was happening, but because they understood that the rule was the only protection they had. Protection from what? I asked. What is it? Where did it come from? My father didn't answer for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. We don't know. That's the thing that keeps me awake at night. We don't know what it is or where it came from. We just know that it's been here for a very long time. How long? I pressed. Since 1963, my mother said. That's the first documented incident, but there were probably others before that. Deaths attributed to accidents or natural causes, disappearances the town decided to forget about. But 1963 is when it started being systematic, when it started hunting. Hunting what? I asked. People wearing red? People wearing red after sunset, my father corrected. During the day, red is fine. Wear all the red you want during the day. But after sunset, when the darkness comes, he trailed off. The rule was created as a system, my mother explained. If everyone follows the rule, if everyone wears dark colors after dark, then nothing stands out. No beacon, nothing for it to hunt. For over 60 years, the town has followed this rule religiously. We pass it down from parent to child, generation to generation. And it works. As long as everyone follows it, it stays satisfied. Satisfied with what? I asked, horror dawning on me. Are you saying it needs to hunt? That it needs to... We don't know, my father said. But we know that when the rule is broken, it hunts. And when it hunts, it kills. So the town decided that the rule would never be broken. Not on purpose, anyway. What about accidents? I asked. What if someone accidentally wears red? My parents were silent. They die, don't they? I said. The people I asked about the rule, they know someone who died. Someone who wore red by accident and... Not always, my mother said quickly. Sometimes it just marks them, follows them, waits for another chance. The implication of that hung in the air between us. There was a woman named Claire Whitmore, my father said after a long moment. She was a tourist, just passing through town. She wore a red cardigan, didn't know about the rule. She was found at her motel that morning, completely catatonic. She spent the rest of her life in an institution, never speaking again, just staring at nothing. Her family tried to sue, but there was no evidence of anything. Just a woman who'd had some kind of psychotic break. And Margaret Sullivan, my mother added quietly. She wore red to a church function by accident. She'd forgotten about the rule. She made it home, but after that, she started to change. She said she could feel it watching her, even during the day. She said it was inside her somehow, looking out through her eyes. 6 months later, she walked into a lake with weights tied to her feet. I felt like the room was spinning. This is insane, I whispered. This is completely insane. Yes, my father agreed. It is, but it's real. And now you know. Why didn't you tell me before? I demanded. When I arrived, why didn't you just say, there's something here that hunts people in red after sunset, so don't wear red? Because, my mother said, and there were tears in her eyes now, we thought maybe you'd be different. Maybe the rule only applied to people born here. Maybe, since you'd been gone for 7 years, it wouldn't matter anymore. We held on to that hope, because we didn't want our child to live in fear the way we do. But it was stupid, my father said harshly. It was stupid and reckless, and you almost died tonight because of our stupidity. I didn't die, I said. I made it home. Why? That's what your father meant, my mother said. The thing didn't take you. It let you go, which means either it wasn't done with you or it was hunting someone else tonight. A new horror crystallized in my mind. Someone else is wearing red right now, aren't they? Someone else is out there. My parents didn't answer, but they didn't need to. We need to call someone, I said, standing up. We need to warn them, the police or... And tell them what? My father asked. That there's a supernatural entity hunting the town? That we have a rule about wearing red? They already know about the rule. Everyone in town knows about the rule. If someone is wearing red after sunset, they're either an outsider, in which case it's not our responsibility, or there's someone from here who chose to break the rule despite knowing the consequences. That's insane, I said. Yes, my father replied, but that's how it works. That's how it's always worked. The rule protects us because we enforce it, collectively. We don't help people break it, and we don't mourn people who break it. We just move forward and be grateful it wasn't us. I looked out the window into the darkness. Somewhere out there, the thing was hunting. Maybe it had already found its prey. Maybe someone was dying right now in the darkness, their red clothing marking them, betraying them, sealing their fate. And the town would wake up tomorrow and pretend it had never happened. I want to leave, I said. Tomorrow, first thing. I'm leaving this town. You can, my mother said. You should. Get out, stay out, and try to forget any of this happened. But, I prompted, hearing the unspoken condition in her voice. But you can never come back, my father said. If you leave, you have to stay away. Because if you come back, if you return to this town, the rule will apply to you. And next time, it might not let you go home. I stood there in the light of my parents' bedroom, surrounded by the illusion of safety, and understood that my old life was over. I had a choice. Stay in this town and live under the shadow of the rule forever, or leave and accept that I could never return. That I could never see my parents again without risking everything. Somewhere in the darkness outside, the thing that hunted in red was still searching, still hungry, still patient. And in the morning, the town would wake up and pretend everything was normal. I didn't leave. I told my parents I was going to. I spent the morning packing my things, making a show of it so they'd see me preparing to go. But I couldn't leave. Not without understanding, not without knowing what that thing was, where it came from, and why it had let me go. My parents didn't argue. They seemed to understand that I'd made my decision, that no amount of reasoning would change it. My mother just held me tight before I went out, and my father looked at me like he was saying goodbye to a ghost. I started with the newspaper archives again, but this time I knew what I was looking for. Deaths in 1963. The first one. Mrs. Hartford had lied about the microfiche being damaged, so I went to the town hall instead and convinced an older clerk named Gerald to let me access the records. He was hesitant until I told him I was researching local history for a project. He seemed relieved that I wasn't asking about the rule. It took me 3 hours, but I found it. August 14th, 1963. Front page. Local man found dead in odd circumstances. The article was vague, deliberately so, I realize now. A man named Robert Chen had been found in Riverside Cemetery, in a state of decomposition, suggesting he'd been dead for several days, despite being reported missing only that morning. There were no details about how he died or what condition his body had been in, just that it was unusual and that the investigation was ongoing. The investigation was never concluded, at least not in any public way. I photographed the article with my phone and kept digging. August 15th, 16th, 17th. Nothing. Then on August 18th, a smaller article. Local investigation closed. No foul play suspected. That was it. The official story died in 3 days. But I found other articles. Deaths that didn't make sense. A woman in 1967 found unresponsive in her home. A teenager in 1971 who'd been hit by a car, except the witnesses said the car had passed through him before hitting him, which was medically impossible. Deaths that happened in clusters, usually in late August or early September. Deaths that the town seemed to process quickly and quietly, never quite explaining what had happened. By evening, I'd compiled a list of 17 confirmed deaths, and another dozen or so that seemed suspicious. 17 people in 60 years. Not many statistically, not when you thought about it in the abstract, but when you thought about it as human beings, each one a person who'd worn red at the wrong time, each one hunted and killed by something the town refused to name. 17 was too many. I needed to talk to someone who'd been here longer than my parents, someone who might actually explain what happened in 1963. I found a phone number for Margaret Keller, who'd been the town librarian before Patricia Hartford. She was retired and lived in Springdale, about 40 minutes away. When I called, she was suspicious at first, but when I explained who I was, the Chen girl's child, she called me, which took me a moment to process, she agreed to talk to me. My mother drove me there without asking questions. She looked like she'd aged 10 years in the past 3 days. Margaret Keller lived in a small house with a neat garden and wind chimes that made discordant sounds in the breeze. She was in her 80s, thin and sharp-eyed, and she studied me carefully when she opened the door. "You look like your mother," she said. "Come in." We sat in her living room with tea and cookies she'd apparently baked that morning. She watched me for a long time before she spoke. "Your parents told you about the rule," she said. It wasn't a question. "They told me about Daniel Pritchard," I said. "But I think there's more. I think the rule is older than that. I think it started in 1963. Margaret set down her teacup very carefully. "You're smarter than I would have hoped," she said quietly. "That's not necessarily a good thing." "Tell me what happened," I said, "in 1963. She was quiet for so long I thought she wouldn't answer. But then she got up and went to a bookshelf, pulling down a photo album with a leather cover. She opened it to a page marked with a faded ribbon and turned it toward me. It was a photograph of the whole town, Main Street, circa 1963. But what struck me immediately was the sky. It was wrong. The photo showed what looked like Aurora Borealis, except this was nowhere near the Arctic. Ribbons of green and purple light twisted across a midnight sky in August. "That was the night," Margaret said. "August 14th. We called them the Northern Lights, though they were further south than they should have been. We'd never seen anything like it. Half the town was outside watching. It was beautiful." "What happened?" I asked. "Robert Chen went to investigate," she said. "He was a scientist, worked at a research facility 2 towns over. He wanted to get a better look, so he went out to the open fields beyond the cemetery. A group of people followed him because they were curious. My husband was there. He saw what happened." She turned the page. There was another photo, this one blurry and poorly composed. It showed a figure standing in the field, arms raised, with something above him. The something was all wrong. A shape that didn't quite resolve properly in the photograph, like the camera couldn't quite focus on it. "Robert was touching it," Margaret said. "My husband said Robert reached up and touched it, and it was like the sky opened. He said Robert started to change. His body was doing things bodies shouldn't do, folding, multiplying, existing in too many places at once." "What was it?" I whispered. "We don't know," Margaret said. "No one ever figured it out. But after Robert died, or after he stopped being Robert more accurately, it didn't go away. It stayed, and it started to hunt." "Why?" I asked. "Why did it start hunting?" "Because Robert had touched it," Margaret said, "had made contact. And when he died, when his body broke down, something awakened. Or maybe it had always been awake, and Robert's death was just the beginning. We never knew for certain, but we knew that red fabric seemed to attract it. Anyone wearing red after sunset became visible to it, became prey." "How do you know it's red?" I asked. "How do you know that's what—" "Because we experimented," Margaret interrupted. "After the first few deaths, after we realized what was happening, people tried different things, different colors, different times. We weren't scientific about it, but we were thorough. Red was the color that triggered it every single time, and sunset was the threshold. As soon as the sun crossed the horizon, the rule went into effect." "What about the thing itself?" I asked. "What does it look like? Have you ever seen it?" "A few people have," Margaret said. "Most of them were the ones it took, but my husband saw it clearly for just a moment before the hunting started. He said it was like looking at a shadow that had gained independent existence, like darkness that had learned to move with purpose. He said it didn't have a fixed form. It was different depending on the angle you looked at it from. Sometimes tentacles, sometimes wings, sometimes something that looked like reaching hands. But all of it was wrong. All of it hurt to look at." "Is it still here?" I asked. "After all these years?" "Yes," Margaret said simply. "We've tried everything we could think of to make it leave. Rituals, prayers, offerings. Nothing works. So we settled on the rule, and the rule works. As long as everyone follows it, the hunting is minimal. The thing seems satisfied with just the occasional person who breaks it. It's like an arrangement." "An arrangement?" I repeated numbly. "A deal," Margaret said. "Though I don't know if the thing understands deals in the way we do. But the effect is the same. We follow the rule, and it mostly leaves us alone. Sometimes someone dies, but compared to what could happen if everyone wore red after sunset..." She trailed off, leaving the rest of the thought unfinished. I spent another hour with Margaret, asking questions she couldn't or wouldn't answer. Where had the thing come from? Was it intelligent? Could it be killed? Could it be reasoned with? She had no answers. No one had answers. The town had simply accepted it as a permanent part of their existence, the way someone accepts a chronic illness. As I was leaving, she grabbed my arm. Her grip was surprisingly strong. "Stop asking questions," she said. "I'm serious. Stop now. Go back to the city and forget any of this happened." "I can't," I said. "I need to understand." "No, you don't," she said fiercely. "You think you do, but you don't. There are some things that understanding doesn't help with. Knowing more about it doesn't make you safer. It just makes you more of a target." "What do you mean?" I asked. She released my arm and looked away. "The thing is aware of when people are paying attention to it, when people are investigating, when people are thinking about it. I don't know how it's aware. Maybe it's connected to the place, maybe it lives in a way we can't comprehend, but it notices. And when it notices someone looking at it too closely, it takes an interest. "Are you saying—" "I'm saying you should stop," she said. "And if you won't stop, you should at least be very, very careful. The more you learn, the more you think about it, the more you investigate, the more you mark yourself as interesting to it. And interesting is the last thing you want to be." The drive home was silent. My mother didn't ask what Margaret had told me, and I didn't volunteer the information. But I could see her white knuckles on the steering wheel, see the tension in her jaw. That night, I started to notice things. Shadows in my peripheral vision that vanished when I looked directly at them. The feeling of being watched when I was alone in my room. At one point, I looked out my window and saw something dark moving across the street below. Something that didn't move like any animal or person I'd ever seen. I told myself I was imagining it. Stress and fear and obsession creating phantom sensations. But deep down, I knew better. I was being noticed. The thing was becoming aware of my awareness of it. And Margaret had been right. That was a dangerous thing. By the third night of experiencing these things, I realized I was terrified of the dark. I left all the lights on in my room and didn't sleep. I just sat in the brightness and tried not to think about what was happening outside, in the darkness, where the thing was beginning to take an interest in me. In the morning, I found something on my doorstep. It was a small animal, a rabbit, I think, though it was hard to tell. It had been painted red. The paint was still wet. I ran to my parents' room, holding the rabbit at arm's length. My father went very pale. My mother started crying. "It's marking you," my father said quietly. "Just like I said would happen. It's marking you as interesting." "What do I do?" I asked. My voice sounded very small. "You do exactly what Margaret should have done," my father said. "You stop investigating. You stop thinking about it. You try to become boring and uninteresting again. And you pray that you're not too late." But I could already feel it. The attention. The weight of something vast and alien turning its awareness toward me. And I understood, with a sickening certainty, that I was already too late. I tried to stop investigating. I really did. I deleted the photos from Margaret's house. I stopped going to the library. I told my parents I was sorry, that I'd been stupid, that I understood now and would follow the rule from now on. I attempted to become the boring, forgettable person Margaret had said I needed to be. It didn't work. The feeling of being watched intensified. It was no longer just in my peripheral vision or late at night. It was constant. Daytime, nighttime, didn't matter. I'd be at the grocery store and suddenly feel it. A weight of attention so intense it made my skin crawl. I'd be eating breakfast with my parents and catch movement outside the window that didn't belong to anything natural. And the strange part was that no one else seemed to notice anything wrong. My parents moved through their days like everything was normal. The town carried on. But I was hyper-aware of the falseness of it all, the careful pretense that everything was fine. It was during the fourth day of this that I saw him. I was walking down Main Street in broad daylight, trying to do something normal, trying to prove that I wasn't marked, when I noticed a man watching me from across the street. He was in his 50s, thin, with graying hair and the hollow look of someone who hadn't slept in a long time. He didn't hide the fact that he was watching me. He just stared, and when I looked at him, he didn't look away. I crossed the street to approach him, and he stepped back into an alley. I followed him. I know that sounds stupid, like I was walking directly into danger, but something compelled me. This man had been watching me with recognition, like he knew exactly what was happening to me. "Who are you?" I called into the alley. He emerged from the shadows, and I could see his hands shaking. "You're marked," he said. It wasn't a question. "How long?" 4 days, I said. "Since I started investigating. Since I..." Started paying attention, he finished. Yeah, that's how it works. You look at it, and it looks at you. And once it's looking, you can't make it stop. Who are you? I asked again. My name is David, he said. I wear red by accident 6 months ago. Forgot about the rule. I've been marked ever since. Looking at him now, I could see the exhaustion in every line of his body. The way his eyes darted constantly to shadows. The tremor in his hands that he couldn't control. Has it tried to, I started. Kill me? No, not yet. But it's close. I can feel it. Every night it gets closer. He grabbed my arm and his grip was urgent. You need to leave. Now. Today. Get out of this town. My parents don't matter, he said harshly. If you stay, it will take you. It's already decided. I can feel it from you. That same marking, that same attention. It's going to hunt you, and the only way to survive is to run. Before I could ask him anything else, he released my arm and walked away, disappearing back into the shadows of the alley like he'd never been there. That night, there was a knock on my door. It was past midnight. My parents were asleep. I opened the door to find a young woman, maybe 30, with wild eyes and hair that looked like it hadn't been brushed in weeks. She wore dark clothes, but there was something off about her, a kind of wrongness in the way she stood, like her body was trying to fold in on itself. "Can I come in?" she asked. "Please, I don't have much time." My rational mind screamed at me not to let a stranger into my house in the middle of the night. But I recognized something in her, that same hunted look I was beginning to understand. I let her in. Her name was Susan. She'd broken the rules 7 months ago. A moment of carelessness. She'd gone outside to get something from her car wearing a red shirt without thinking. By the time she realized her mistake, it was too late. The thing had already noticed her. "It watches me during the day," she said, sitting in my kitchen with a cup of coffee she wasn't drinking. "Not constantly, but I can feel it, like a weight pressing down. And at night, it gets closer. I can feel it circling my house. Sometimes I see it in my windows, not a reflection, actually in the glass, looking in at me." "Why haven't you left?" I asked. "Because it follows," she said simply. "I tried. About 3 months ago, I drove to the next town over and checked into a motel. It came that night. Not to take me, I think it wanted to punish me for trying to escape. It took the motel clerk instead. Young girl, couldn't have been more than 18. She wasn't even marked. The thing took her to send me a message. I felt sick. What was the message? That I can't leave. That the moment I break the boundary of the town, it will kill anyone around me instead. So I came back. And since I came back, it's been patient. Waiting. For what? I asked. For me to break, Susan said. I think that's what it does sometimes. It doesn't just want to kill. Sometimes it wants to watch you break under the weight of being hunted. It's curious about us, about how we respond to fear. Over the next few days, I met more people. David found me at a coffee shop and introduced me to someone named Maria, who'd been marked 2 years ago. Maria introduced me to Thomas, who'd made a mistake that marked him 5 years back. There were others too, all of them hollow-eyed, all of them at various stages of despair. We started meeting in secret, not at any of our homes. We were afraid the thing would use that knowledge against us, but in abandoned places. An old factory on the edge of town, a boarded-up church. We talked about our experiences, trying to find patterns, trying to understand what the thing wanted. It hunts red, David said during one of our meetings. That's established, but why? Why does red specifically trigger it? Because red is blood, Thomas offered. Red is life. Maybe it hunts the color of vitality. Maybe it hunts us because we broke faith with the agreement, Maria said bitterly. The town has a contract with this thing. Wear dark at night. Don't mark yourself. And in exchange, it stays satisfied. When we break the rule, we're breaking the contract, so it hunts us specifically. But that's not a contract, I said. That's extortion. That's slavery. We're enslaving an entire town to this thing's appetite. Yes, David said. And the town is fine with that, because the alternative is chaos. If everyone wore red whenever they wanted, if everyone ignored the rule, the thing would be hunting constantly. It would take dozens of people, maybe hundreds. So the town sacrifices a few of us to keep the majority safe. We have to do something, I said. We have to find a way to stop it, or kill it, or what? Thomas interrupted. We've had decades to figure this out, and no one has. If it could be killed, someone would have done it by now. Unless we're approaching it wrong, I said. What if we're not trying to kill it? What if we're trying to communicate with it? Everyone stared at me. Communicate with it? Maria said. It's not a person. It's not something we can negotiate with. We don't know that, I said. Margaret said it was aware of us, that it understood when we were paying attention. Maybe that means it has some level of consciousness. Maybe it can be reasoned with. Or maybe, David said quietly, it will just take you faster if you try. That night, I was alone in my room when I saw it. It was at my window, pressing against the glass from the outside. Not a shape I could describe. It was more like the air itself had taken on a malevolent quality, like I was looking through a lens that distorted reality. I could see my reflection in the glass, but around my reflection was something else. Something that occupied the same space, but didn't reflect light the way matter should. I didn't move. I didn't scream. I just looked at it, and it looked at me. And in that moment of eye contact, if something like this could have eyes, I felt it. The hunger, the alien curiosity, the sense that I was being appraised as a piece in some game I couldn't comprehend. Then it was gone. The window was just a window again, my reflection normal and alone. But my hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold them still. The next morning, I woke to find my doorstep covered in red paint. Not an animal this time, just paint. Gallons of it, spilled deliberately across the porch. A message, a warning, or maybe a promise. My mother saw it and started packing my things. "You have to go," she said, not meeting my eyes. "Today. Right now. I don't care where. Away." "I can't," I said. "Susan said." "Susan is marked," my mother said harshly. "But you're my child, and if there's any chance at all that leaving might save you, you're taking it." My father said nothing. He just sat in the living room and stared at his hands. I should have left. Every rational part of my brain was screaming at me to pack a bag and never look back. But I couldn't, because I'd realized something during that moment at the window. I wasn't the only one being hunted. David, Susan, Maria, Thomas, and all the others who'd been marked, they were being hunted too. And the town had decided they didn't matter, decided they were acceptable losses. And I'd decided I wanted to know why. I wanted to understand what this thing was and what it wanted. And if possible, I wanted to make it stop. That decision, I would later realize, was the moment I sealed my fate. Because the thing, whatever it was, had been waiting for someone to make that decision. Waiting for someone to stop running and start fighting back. And now that I'd made it, it was ready to play a different game. We decided to do it on a moonless night. The plan was simple in its desperation. We would gather at the location where the thing first appeared, back in 1963, the open field beyond Riverside Cemetery. We would bring every marked person we could find, every person the thing had taken an interest in. and we would confront it, force it into the open. Either kill it, or communicate with it, or... I didn't really know what the "or" was. But doing something felt better than waiting to die. There were 12 of us in the end. David, Susan, Maria, Thomas, and 8 others whose names I learned over the week of planning. Some of them had been marked for years. Others, like me, were relatively new. We gathered supplies, anything we thought might help. Salt, which supposedly repelled supernatural things in folklore. Iron, for the same reason. Knives, baseball bats, a few firearms that no one was really confident about using. We brought flashlights and rope and water. We prepared like we were going on a camping trip, because none of us really knew what we were preparing for. My parents begged me not to go. My mother cried. My father tried to forbid me, which only reminded me that I was an adult and could make my own terrible decisions. I told them I loved them and didn't say goodbye, because goodbye felt too permanent. We met at the edge of town just after sunset. The sky was darkening rapidly, that brief twilight window collapsing into full darkness. No stars were visible. The clouds were too thick. It felt like the atmosphere itself was holding its breath. "Last chance to back out," David said, though he didn't sound like he believed anyone would. No one did. We started walking toward the cemetery. Riverside Cemetery was on the edge of town, separated from the main area by about a mile of increasingly wild terrain. The path we took was overgrown, barely used. As we walked, I became aware of the wrongness of the place. The trees seemed to lean away from our path, and there was no sound, no crickets, no birds, no rustling of small animals. Just the sound of our footsteps and our breathing. The cemetery gates were old wrought iron, ornate and flaking rust. Beyond them, headstones rose out of the darkness like broken teeth. We passed through them without hesitation. We were committed now. The field was past the cemetery, where Robert Chen had died 60 years ago. As we approached it, I felt the temperature drop. Not gradually, but suddenly, like we'd stepped across a threshold into a different season. Our breath became visible in the frigid air. "There," Susan pointed. In the center of the field stood something. Not clearly visible, but present. A distortion in the darkness, like reality itself was bent in that space. Just looking at it made my head hurt in a way I couldn't describe. It was wrong in a way that transcended physical wrongness. It was wrong in a way that violated fundamental assumptions about how reality should work. We stood there, staring at it, and I felt my nerve beginning to crack. This was a mistake. This was suicide. We should run. But David stepped forward, then Thomas. Then the rest of us followed, walking toward the thing like moths to a flame, like we'd been pulled forward by invisible strings. As we got closer, I began to understand what I was looking at. It wasn't a creature in any conventional sense. It was more like a wound in the fabric of existence, a place where the normal rules of physics and perception didn't apply. I could see what looked like limbs, but they bent at angles that shouldn't be possible. I could see what might have been a head, but it seemed to exist in multiple places at once. Looking at it directly caused my vision to blur and refocus constantly, my brain unable to process what it was seeing. "We want to talk to you," David called out, his voice shaking. "We know you can understand us. We want to make a deal." The thing moved. Not physically, but in some other way. It shifted dimensions, and suddenly it was closer without having traveled the space between. Several of us screamed. "What kind of deal?" a voice said. It didn't come from the thing. It came from everywhere and nowhere. It resonated in my bones, and I realized with horror that we could understand it. Not through words exactly, but through some kind of telepathic impression that our brains interpreted as language. "We want you to stop hunting us," Maria said. her voice stronger than I would have expected. "We want you to leave this town. Leave us all alone." The thing made a sound that might have been laughter. It was the sound of breaking glass and screaming wind, and something far older than humanity. "I cannot leave," it said. "This is my place. This is where I was called." "Called?" Thomas asked. "By who?" There was a long pause. The thing seemed to turn its attention inward, or perhaps it was simply considering whether to answer. When it spoke again, its voice had changed. It was colder now, more alien. "By them," it said. "By your people. They called me here in 1963. They knew what they were doing. They knew what they were inviting." No, that couldn't be right. "That's not true," I said, stepping forward. "It was an accident. Robert Chen." "Robert Chen was sent," the thing interrupted. "Sent deliberately. A sacrifice to call me here. An anchor to bind me to this place." The ground beneath us seemed to tilt. I looked at David and saw my own horror reflected in his face. "You're lying," Susan said, but there was doubt in her voice. "Come," the thing said. "I will show you." Images flooded my mind. Not visual exactly, but somehow I could understand them. I saw a gathering in 1963, a secret meeting of town leaders. I saw them discussing something that had been happening in other towns, other places. Something was hunting. Something was taking people. And they decided, collectively, that it was better to invite it here, to bind it to their place, than to risk it arriving uncontrolled. I saw them selecting Robert Chen, a scientist, brilliant and arrogant, who'd made enemies, who'd wanted to investigate the auroras, who would naturally go out into that field when he heard about the lights in the sky. They'd known he would go, they'd known he would investigate, and they'd prepared the summoning. Robert Chen hadn't been a victim of an accident. He'd been a sacrifice. "And after?" David demanded, his voice hollow. "After you were bound here, what was the arrangement?" "The arrangement is simple," the thing said. "You will give me sustenance. You will wear red after sunset, and I will hunt. Those who follow the rule will be safe. Those who break it will feed me. And in exchange, I will not hunt indiscriminately. I will not take more than necessary. I will be satisfied." "That's not an arrangement," I heard myself say. "That's a hostage situation. That's genocide." "It is survival," the thing said. "For your town, it is survival. Before I came, your town was dying, small, irrelevant, fading into nothing. Now you have a purpose. Now you have a rule that binds you together. Now you matter." "We matter because we're terrified," Maria said. "We matter because we live under constant fear. You've made us into slaves." "Yes," the thing said, and there was something almost sympathetic in its tone. "That is what you are, but it is a better life than you would have had otherwise. Your town has prospered. Your economy is stable. Your people live longer than the national average. All because of the fear, all because of me." I understood then. The thing wasn't a random predator or a cosmic horror that had come to the town by chance. It was a parasite that had been deliberately invited. And the town hadn't just accepted it. They'd built their entire society around it. They'd made the fear and the death the foundation of their entire existence. "There's another way," I said desperately. "There is no other way," the thing said. "This is the only arrangement that works. You know this. You feel it. The moment you tried to investigate, the moment you began to pay attention to me, you understood. You understood that I am necessary, that I am the only thing keeping this town from tearing itself apart." "That's insane," Thomas said. "Yes," the thing agreed. "Sanity is a luxury towns like yours cannot afford." I felt something crack inside me, because I realized the thing was right. I'd felt it. The moment I started investigating, the moment I began to understand the structure beneath the surface. The fear was what held the town together. The rule was what gave people meaning. Remove the fear, remove the rule, remove me, and the town would collapse. Without something external to fear, the fractures in their society would become visible. The divisions would widen. The careful balance they'd maintained for 60 years would shatter. "What do you want?" I asked. "Why did you let me come here? Why did you let any of us come here?" "Because you asked the right questions," the thing said. "Because you showed that you had the capacity to understand. Because I am lonely, and I wanted to speak to something that could comprehend what I am. And because..." It paused, and I felt something almost like emotion in its presence. "Because some of you are growing tired of the arrangement. Some of you are ready to break it, and I wanted to see if you would try." "We're going to kill you," David said, raising one of the firearms. "We're going to find a way to end this." The thing moved toward him, and David fired. The bullet passed through it without effect, and the thing wrapped what might have been tentacles around his body. His scream cut through the night, and for a moment, I saw his body changing, warping, doing impossible things. Then he fell silent. When the thing released him, David was still alive, but he wasn't the same. His eyes had changed. His mouth moved wrong. He looked at us with something other than human consciousness looking back. "I do not want to harm you," the thing said, "but I will if I must. I am bound to this place. I am bound to this arrangement, and I will protect it." We ran. I'm not proud of it, but we ran. We left David behind, left whatever remained of him standing in that field with the thing, and we ran back toward town. Behind us, I could hear it calling out, but its voice didn't follow us beyond the cemetery gates. It seemed content to let us go. We were all breathing hard by the time we made it back to the main streets of town. Maria had a cut on her arm from running through branches. Susan was crying silently. Thomas kept shaking his head, repeating, "No, no, no," like he could deny what he'd just experienced. "We have to tell people," I said. "We have to tell them what the town did, what they invited." "And then what?" Maria asked bitterly. "You think anyone will care? You think they'll suddenly decide that all the stability and prosperity wasn't worth it?" She was right. I knew she was right. The town would simply deny it. They'd rationalize it. They'd explain that the sacrifice was necessary, that individual lives didn't matter compared to collective survival. They'd turn us away or turn us in, depending on which served their interests better. We stood in the darkness of Main Street, 12 people who'd learned the truth. And we understood, finally, that knowing the truth changed nothing. The thing in the field had been right. There was no other way. The arrangement was the only thing that worked. The only way the town could exist was if it had something external to fear. And the only way any of us could survive was to accept that some people would have to die to keep that fear alive. We'd gone looking for salvation and found only the exact opposite. The knowledge that we were all complicit in an evil we could never escape. I spent the next 3 days in a state of paralysis. I couldn't tell my parents what I'd learned. It would destroy them. But I also couldn't pretend I didn't know. I moved through the house like a ghost, eating when they put food in front of me, sleeping when they told me to. My mother asked repeatedly if I was okay. My father just watched me with sad, knowing eyes. Susan came to see me on the 3rd day. She looked different now, emptied out somehow. She told me she'd decided to stop running from the thing. She was going to let it take her. Better to end it quickly than to wait in constant terror. "There's another way," I said, though I didn't know if there was. "No, there isn't," Susan replied. "We saw it. We heard it. The thing is right. The town needs it. The people need it. And we're just collateral damage. Acceptable losses in a system we can't change." She left, and I didn't try to stop her. That night, I found out later, she walked into Riverside Cemetery and simply stood in the open field, waiting. The thing came for her. They found her body the next morning, arranged in a pattern like all the others. The town mourned her politely and forgot about her quickly. I realized then what the thing had meant about some people being ready to break the arrangement. Susan hadn't broken it. She'd surrendered to it. And somehow, I suspected, that was almost the same thing. That's when I made my decision. If the arrangement couldn't be broken by force or negotiation, then maybe it could be broken by making it visible, by exposing it so completely that the town couldn't pretend it didn't exist anymore. The thing had said people needed the fear to maintain their society. But what if everyone knew exactly where the fear came from? What if they couldn't pretend it was natural or necessary? I went to my closet and pulled out the red hoodie, the one I'd worn on the first night, the one that had attracted the thing's attention. I held it in my hands and felt the weight of it. Such a simple thing, a piece of fabric dyed a particular color, and yet it was the pivot point upon which the entire town's existence turned. My mother found me sitting on my bed with the hoodie in my lap. "No," she said immediately. "Absolutely not." "I have to," I said. "You'll die," she said. "You understand that? You wear that after sunset and it will hunt you. It will kill you." "Maybe," I said. "Or maybe it will do something even more important. It will stop pretending. It will show itself completely. It will become undeniable." "You're not a martyr," my father said from the doorway. I hadn't heard him come in. "You're not a hero. You're just going to die for nothing." "Am I?" I asked. "Or am I going to die to show everyone exactly what they've built their lives on?" My parents didn't try to stop me physically. Maybe they understood that I couldn't be stopped, or maybe they were too tired to fight anymore. As the sun began to set, I put on the red hoodie and told them I was going out for a walk. "I love you both," I said. "I'm sorry." My mother held me for a long time. She didn't say anything. She didn't need to. I walked downtown as the sun touched the horizon. This time, I wasn't running. This time, I walked slowly, deliberately, making sure as many people as possible saw me in that red hoodie as the light faded. Mrs. Holloway saw me from her flower shop and went pale. A group of teenagers on the corner scattered in panic. People pulled their curtains shut. The street emptied of life with practiced efficiency. By the time the sun had completely disappeared, I was alone on Main Street. Completely alone. The streetlights flickered to life, but they seemed dimmer than usual, like they were hesitant to illuminate the darkness. I stood in the center of the street and waited. The scratching started first, just like before. But this time, it was louder, more aggressive. It was coming from everywhere. The buildings, the sidewalks, the air itself. I could feel it converging on me from all directions. Then it came. It didn't approach slowly like it was hunting a prey. It came directly, rapidly, a distortion in reality moving toward me with terrible purpose. It was larger than I remembered, or maybe I'd just been farther away the first time. Its form was even less stable than before, constantly shifting, like it was struggling to maintain coherence in our dimension. "Why?" it asked, its voice filled with what might have been fury. "Why do you force this?" "Because someone has to," I said. I wasn't running, I was standing my ground. Because pretending it's necessary doesn't make it less evil. Because the town needs to see exactly what they've sacrificed for stability. "You will die," it said. "I know," I replied, "but I'll die in the middle of Main Street, where everyone can see, where the cameras on the streetlights can record it, where people will have to witness exactly what their fear looks like." I felt something shift in its presence. Hesitation, maybe, or confusion. For a moment, I thought it might not take me. I thought I might have found a weakness, the threat of exposure, of being made real and undeniable to the world outside this town. But then it moved. The pain was indescribable. I felt my body changing, warping, existing in multiple places and times simultaneously. I wanted to scream, but I didn't have a mouth anymore. Or I had too many mouths. Or mouths weren't the right concept for describing the way I was experiencing sensation. And then, just as suddenly, it stopped. I was standing in the middle of Main Street, exactly where I'd been before. The thing was withdrawing, pulling back into itself. Around me, doors were opening. People were coming out of their homes, their shops, their hiding places. They were seeing me, seeing the red hoodie, seeing what the rule really meant. I looked down at my hands and saw that they were normal. I was fine. Nothing had happened to me. The thing had touched me, had filled my mind with its presence for a moment. And then it had let me go. And I understood why. The town was watching. Cameras were rolling. Social media feeds were already lighting up with footage of a person in red standing on Main Street, being approached by something, and then... what? What would they see when they watched the video? A person in red standing alone? The footage would be corrupted, confused, impossible to interpret. The town would see it, but people outside the town wouldn't understand. The thing had realized something crucial. It couldn't be proven to the outside world. Its existence was fundamentally tied to this place, this town, these specific rules. The moment you left Millbrook, the evidence would become ambiguous. The fear would become abstract. The reality of it would dissolve into interpreted video and unclear footage. Exposure wouldn't work. Exposure would only create conspiracy theories and skepticism. The thing was safe because it was local, because it couldn't scale. "I'm sorry," I said to the crowd that had gathered. I was crying now, though I'm not sure if it was from fear or despair. "I'm sorry. I thought I could stop it." Mayor Pritchard stepped forward, the uncle of the teenager who'd been killed in 1987. He looked at me with neither pity nor anger, just tired acceptance. "Come," he said. "We need to talk about what happens now." I followed him, and the crowd parted to let us through. Behind me, the thing returned to its field beyond the cemetery, satisfied that its secret was safe. The town would continue. The arrangement would hold. And I would either die or be absorbed into the machinery of the town's survival. As I walked past the shops and homes of Millbrook, I caught glimpses of people staring at me through windows. The marked, I realized. They were watching to see if I'd succeeded, waiting to see if resistance was possible. When they saw me walking with the mayor, walking toward the town hall instead of collapse or death, I saw hope flicker in their faces. Maybe there was a way out that wasn't death. Maybe there was an arrangement we could make. But I knew better. There was no arrangement that broke the cycle. There was only different configurations of the same trap. In the town hall office, the mayor offered me tea and a chair. He explained their options to me very carefully. I could leave town and never return. Susan's choice was still available. I could stay and follow the rule forever, always watching the darkness, always waiting. Or I could participate. Participate? I asked. In maintaining the arrangement, he said. In helping us enforce the rule. in being part of the system that keeps us safe. He explained how it would work. In a few years, I would be offered a position, maybe on the town council, maybe in local government. I would use that position to ensure the rule was followed, to ensure that young people understood the necessity of the rule, to handle the marked when they appeared. "You'll become like us," the mayor said. "You'll make the same peace we made." "And if I don't?" I asked. "Then you'll be marked until you either leave or, well, the thing gets hungry sometimes. Its hunger is particularly acute for those who refuse to accept the arrangement." I understood. I was being offered an illusion of choice, but the choice was already made. I was trapped. Either I accepted the system and became part of it, or I fought the system and was consumed by it. Either way, I was bound. "I need time to think," I said. The mayor nodded like he'd expected this. "You have until sunset tomorrow," he said. "After that, we'll assume you've made your choice." I left the town hall and walked home in a daze. My parents were waiting up, their faces showing the strain of the past hours. My mother rushed to me and held me, checking me over for injuries. "What happened?" my father asked. "We saw the cameras outside. We saw you standing there, and then it looked like..." "Like nothing happened," I finished. "Because nothing happened. That's the point. Nothing can happen. The thing can't be stopped." I explained everything to them. The mayor's offer, the reality of being marked, the impossibility of escape. As I spoke, I watched my father's face change. He already knew most of it. He'd made the same peace with the system years ago. That night, I lay in bed and stared at the ceiling. I could feel the thing beyond the cemetery, waiting for my decision. I could feel the town's collective breath, held in anticipation. I could feel the marked scattered throughout Millbrook, all of us wondering if there was any way out. And I realized that I was at a crossroads, but not the one the mayor had offered me. I had one more choice remaining. I could accept the arrangement and become part of the machinery of horror that kept this town alive. Or I could reject it completely and become a cautionary tale. Another body arranged in a pattern for the town to forget about. There was no third option. The thing had made that clear. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to tell you this story. I'm going to lay it all out, everything that happened, everything I learned. And I'm going to ask you to consider something as you sit there, reading these words in the comfort of your own home, in whatever town you call yours. Every place has rules. Every community has its unofficial arrangements, things that everyone knows but no one discusses, behaviors that are enforced through quiet social pressure and careful omission, rules that don't make logical sense when you examine them too closely. What are the rules in your town? What do you follow without questioning? What fear holds your community together? And what if I told you that your town has a thing too? Not exactly like mine, maybe, but something. Something that benefits from your compliance. Something that hunts those who don't follow the rules. Something that feeds on the collective fear and cohesion it provides. I'm standing at my bedroom window as I write this. The sun is about to set. I need to make my choice. I need to decide if I'm going to put on the red hoodie and walk outside one more time, or if I'm going to accept the mayor's offer. I don't know what I'm going to do yet. But I know this. Someone is reading this story right now, and they're wearing red. And if they're reading it after sunset, well, welcome to Millbrook. The rule exists for a reason.